Hello there. Welcome to the Light Story Club. Settle in and find a comfy spot to relax. Before we get to the story, I would love to know your favorite myths and monsters. Comment where in the world you are and let's begin the story. The letter arrived in a thin cream envelope, the kind you see in old movies where everything important feels hand-delivered by fate. Elira didn't recognize the handwriting or the strange European postage stamp, but she opened it anyway, more curious than cautious. To Miss Elira Vance, heir to the estate of Father Corin Vance. The Cathedral of St. Aramanth, and all lands contained therein, are hereby transferred to your name as next of kin. We await your signature to complete the claim. The cathedral lies in Avemore Hollow. You are encouraged to arrive before the full moon. That last line made her squint. Encouraged? Before the full moon? It felt theatrical. Still, something about it drew her. Her father had never mentioned a Corin Vance. No uncles or priests or relatives in Europe. But now, she apparently owned a cathedral. Elira arrived in Avemore Hollow 3 days later, with only a backpack and the envelope tucked into her coat. The drive had taken her through forests that grew thicker and darker the deeper she went, until the last hour was nothing but twisting fog and gnarled trees that seemed to lean toward the road. The village was tiny, 6 houses and a single inn built of ancient stone. The locals were quiet, with hollow eyes and sharp stares. She introduced herself at the inn, and the innkeeper, a stooped woman named Merrin, stared at the envelope for a full minute before nodding slowly. "You shouldn't stay too long," Merrin murmured, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "There are reasons that church has stood empty for so long." "I thought it was abandoned," Elira replied. Merrin looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Abandoned, yes. But never empty." The cathedral stood on a hill at the edge of the village, shrouded in ivy and mist. Its spires were crooked, like fingers reaching into a grey sky. The iron gate creaked open on its own as Elira approached. The air grew colder the moment she stepped through. Inside, the pews were thick with dust, and candles stood untouched for decades. Stained glass windows stared down in silence, their colors faded like bruises. But the most striking thing was the mural behind the altar. It took up the entire wall, an angel painted in unsettling detail, its wings folded inward as if hiding something. Its face was serene, but the eyes had been smeared dark. The halo around its head was cracked down the center, and what should have been light looked more like shadow. A brass plate beneath the mural read, "St. Aramanth, Guardian of the Bound Gate." The more she stared, the more uneasy she felt. The angel's body was twisted in ways that didn't match the grace of heavenly beings. One wing drooped. Its hand stretched downward, long fingers extended, almost inviting. That night, she slept in one of the dusty quarters behind the cathedral. The bed was hard, the fireplace cold. Still, she was too tired to care. At precisely midnight, the sound began. Not footsteps, scraping. She sat up in the darkness, the sheets like ice around her. The sound came from the nave. Scrape. Pause. Scrape again. Something dragging along stone. She crept out of bed and opened her door. The corridor beyond was pitch black, but the scraping was clearer now, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Her flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then died. Then came the voice. Whispered. Soft. "Elira." She slammed the door and pressed her back against it, heart thudding. Silence. In the morning, the hallway looked unchanged. The mural unchanged. Everything as if the night had never happened. But the angel's hand, its painted hand, now pointed downward. Not inviting. Beckoning. She spent the day exploring. The cathedral had hidden rooms, prayer halls, confessionals, even an underground crypt, long sealed off by rusted chains. She found Father Corin's journal in a dusty drawer. Most of the pages had rotted away, but the surviving entries chilled her. She speaks through the walls. She shows herself at midnight. She is not holy, not anymore. I tried to paint over the eyes. They came back. I can't hear the bells anymore, only her wings. That night, the sound returned. Louder this time, a fluttering. Then the unmistakable sound of feet, bare, slow, stepping closer and closer. Her door creaked open on its own. She couldn't move. The angel stood there, not painted, not imagined. Full-bodied, white-robed, wings dragging behind her like broken silk. Her eyes were empty hollows, and yet Elira felt them pulling at her soul. The angel reached out. "I remember you," she said, in a voice that cracked like glass. "You left me behind." Elira couldn't scream. She woke on the floor, ice cold, the room untouched. Her hands were bleeding, scratched with marks that looked like feathers carved by fingernails. The mural was different again. The angel's wings were spread wide now, and behind them, a door, painted shut, but not for long. Elira did not leave the cathedral. She should have. Instead, she spent the morning trying to rationalize what had happened, telling herself it was sleep paralysis, or hallucination, or trauma buried deep from childhood. Anything but what she truly feared, that the angel had moved. She stood in the nave now, staring at the mural again, heart hammering as if it, too, understood the wrongness baked into the walls. The angel's wings had spread wide, revealing a painted door directly behind it, a door that had not been there when she arrived. She touched the mural. The paint was warm. Down in the crypt, the chains were gone. Elira had come here to escape her life, not confront something older than sanity. But her curiosity, always her weakness, dragged her further into the depths. The stone stairs descended into cold shadows, deeper than seemed possible for a building so small. She carried a lantern now, the one she found in the sacristy, and it flickered with every step. The walls were lined with scripture. Verses she didn't recognize, scrawled in a spiraling, inhuman script. Every few meters, the pattern broke and a feather was painted in the margins, just one, always black. At the bottom of the crypt was a chapel. It was inverted, a mirror of the one above, but wrong. Where the altar should have been, there was a pit of ashes. The stained glass was cracked, and instead of saints, it depicted robed figures hiding their faces. Candles burned without flames. And carved into the far wall, not painted, was the angel again. No longer with wings. Just scars where they had been torn away. She found another page of Father Corin's journal near the altar. The ink was smeared, but she could make out a few lines. The door opens only for blood. Hers or ours. I heard her call to me from beneath the floor. She wants to return. Aramanth was never a saint. She was a seal. Elira backed away from the wall. As she did, a wind stirred the ashes in the pit. Something shifted beneath them. She knelt, trembling, and reached out. Her fingers brushed bone. Not animal. Not human. Too long. Too many joints. That night, Elira made the mistake of dreaming. In her dream, she was 8 years old, holding a feather in a forest that stretched forever. The sky was red. The trees whispered in languages she had no words for. And in the center of it all stood the angel, not Aramanth, but something larger, crowned with branches, eyes glowing like moonless stars. "You are the key," it said. "The gate breaks because you returned." She turned to run, but the trees closed in. The feather in her hand sliced her palm. The angel smiled. "You remember the hymn, don't you?" Then Elira woke up singing in a voice not her own. The next morning, She heard bells. But the cathedral had no bells. The sound came from the mural. The angel's wings, now torn and tattered, stretched around the painted door as if resisting it. Blood dripped from their tips. Red paint or something older. The door in the mural pulsed. Elira approached, candle in hand. She touched the painted knob. The flame extinguished. That night, Merrin knocked on the cathedral's front doors. Elira let her in, grateful for company, though Merrin seemed more afraid than curious. Her eyes darted from pillar to pillar, and she whispered as if worried something might hear. "You should not sleep here." "I'm not afraid of ghosts," Elira lied. "It is not a ghost." Merrin trembled. "It's a memory too heavy to die." Merrin handed her an old rosary, carved from bone. Not ivory, bone. She feeds on belief. The more you doubt her, the stronger she becomes. Before Elira could ask more, Merrin was gone. And outside, the wind had begun to howl like wings tearing through the sky. Elira dreamt again. This time she was standing before the mural, but the door behind the angel was open. Light spilled out, not golden, but grey, colorless, pulsing like a wound. Inside stood 1,000 figures, all wingless. Some wept. Some bled from the eyes. Some had faces like her own. And behind them towered Amaranth, but not as a woman, as something old, twisted, crowned in rust. Wings formed of black smoke, dragging behind her like chains. And her voice, louder this time, echoed through the dream. "You made me. You unmade me. You owe me." She awoke with her hands clutching the bone rosary. And the mural's door, painted only yesterday, was now ajar. Just a crack. But from the crack came the scent of roses and rot. She began to research. She called universities, asked about Saint Amaranth, tried archives, even drove to the next village. But no records existed of the saint. Not in any book, church, or canon. As if she had been erased, or never permitted to be recorded in the first place. Back in the cathedral, Elira noticed something new, carvings beneath the pews. Names. Scratched in with fingernails or knives. Dozens of them. Elira Vance. Corin Vance. And a third name, one she didn't recognize. Elaniel. The name pulsed with warmth when she touched it. A bell rang. A real one this time. She turned to the mural. The door was open halfway now. Inside was no longer painted. It was deep, dark, breathing. And from it came the sound of feathers rustling. Elira stepped back. But the mural's painted hand reached out and gripped her wrist. The painted hand was cold, not like ice, but like stone forgotten in a grave. It closed around Elira's wrist and pulled, not into the wall, but into a memory. She didn't fall asleep. She wasn't dreaming. It felt like drowning. She was no longer in the cathedral. She stood beneath a red sky, in a place between time and air. The ground was made of broken wings, and above her, a cathedral hung upside down in the sky like a dead thing forgotten by the heavens. She heard weeping. She followed the sound. A figure sat in the ash, her back turned. Feathers lay scattered around her, like petals from a flower that had been torn apart by cruel hands. Elira approached slowly. "Are you Amaranth?" The figure turned. The face was not monstrous. It was her own, but with white eyes, and scars beneath them that glowed like gold. "No," the figure said. "I am what comes after." Then the figure bled from the mouth and collapsed into dust. Elira woke gasping, alone on the cathedral floor. Her wrist was bruised where the mural had gripped her, and the bone rosary Merrin had given her was shattered beside her. And the door in the mural was now fully open. No painting, no illusion. It was now a real door, embedded in the wall behind the altar, arched in stone, etched with writing in a language she had never seen but somehow read. This gate holds the bound. This gate drinks the true. This gate belongs to Elaniel. The name burned in her mind. She scoured Father Corin's journal again, tearing through every remaining page. Hidden in a crack of the spine was a folded note. In Corin's hand, but jagged, rushed. She came to me as light. But she was not from heaven. Her true name is Elaniel. Not angel. Not demon. The boundary itself. I locked the door with her own wings. If she opens it again, all names will be unspoken. Elira sat down hard on the stone floor. She had seen Elaniel before. Not in dreams. In drawings she'd made as a child. Sketches of a pale woman with no face and wings that ended in shadows. She used to call her Feather Lady, a childhood imaginary friend. But no one believed her. She went to Merrin's in that night. I need to know what Elaniel is. Merrin shook her head. You already know. She's the silence between prayers. The thing churches pretend not to believe in. Not fallen, bound. She showed me, myself. Because she was you. Once. Or perhaps you were her. What does that mean? Merrin lit a candle and pressed something into Elira's hand. A stone, polished smooth. Each of us bears pieces of old names. Bloodlines don't remember, but bones do. If she's calling to you, it means you were part of her before. Elira clutched the stone. Then how do I stop her? You don't. Merrin's eyes glistened. You choose which version of you to become. Back at the cathedral, the mural was gone. Only the door remained. Carved and solid, surrounded by feathers nailed to the wall. Real feathers now. Still wet with blood. Elira didn't know how long she stood there before she realized the door was whispering. Not in words. In memories. She heard her mother singing her lullaby. Her father laughing before his death. Her childhood bedroom creaking in the wind. Moments she had forgotten. Some that hadn't happened yet. Then came the final whisper. Elira is not your only name. She opened the door. Darkness. So complete it devoured her lantern's light. But she stepped through. The world inside was not hell. It was not heaven. It was before. Stone pillars stretched upward forever. Creatures with no mouths watched her with sorrow. The air buzzed with the sound of unseen wings. In the center of it all, Elaniel. Tall. Wingless. Robed in ash. But still with her face. You crossed the veil, Elaniel said. Why me? Elira asked. Why do I matter to you? Because you are the last piece. The only one who still believes I'm real. Elira stepped closer. I don't believe in you. Elaniel smiled with her eyes. You do. Otherwise, I would still be bound. The world shifted. Now they stood in the forest from Elira's dreams. Only this time, the trees had no leaves. The sky wept black snow. Elaniel reached into her own chest and pulled out a blade made of silence. I can give you a choice, she said. Take my wings. Finish what Corin began. Bury me forever. Or... She held out the blade. Take my name. Let me live through you. Be what I was meant to be. Elira stared at the weapon. In her reflection, she saw herself with wings. Empty eyes. A mouth that could end prayers. You want me to be your vessel. Elaniel only nodded. Elira gripped the blade. But instead of plunging it into Elaniel, she cut her own palm. The moment her blood struck the ground, the entire world screamed. Not loudly. Just one soft, keening wail, like a child lost in a cathedral. Elaniel staggered backward. You bind me again, she gasped. No, Elira whispered. I bind myself with you. And with that, the door behind her slammed shut. She woke back in the cathedral. The door was gone. The mural returned, this time with a new angel. One with her face. Its wings folded gently, not in warning, but in sorrow. Beneath it, the brass plate now read, Elanial, Gatebound. The last of her name. Elira left the cathedral the next morning. No one stopped her. The villagers no longer looked afraid. Merrin handed her a small package, a feather sealed in wax, black and red. If it ever opens again, Merrin said, you'll feel it. Elira nodded. She understood now. She had not defeated the angel. She had become her jailer. And jailers don't sleep. They only wait. It had been 3 weeks since Elira left Avemore Hollow. She didn't speak of what had happened, not to her friends, not to doctors, not even to herself. She settled into a quiet rhythm back in the city, teaching art to children at a dusty community center, sketching in the evenings, locking the door 3 times before bed. She kept the feather Merrin gave her in a small glass box beside her bed. At first, it was just a symbol, a souvenir of madness. But then it began to move. Slightly, only when she blinked. And sometimes, just before sleep, she'd hear it whisper. One word. Soon. Her dreams were no longer her own. She drifted each night into the forest beyond time, where Elanial's broken wings hung from branches like banners. There, Elira walked as both herself and something else, eyes that glowed faintly, fingertips sharp as memory. In the dreams, she no longer feared Elanial. She feared what Elanial had left behind. The others. The unnamed. She began seeing them in waking life. Once, crossing the street, she glimpsed a figure in the crowd wearing a mask made of feathers, unmoving while the rest of the world rushed past. Another time, in a library, a book fell open at her feet. It had no title, no spine. Every page was blank except one. To speak a true name is to unbind the world from silence. She tore that page out and burned it. But the words never stopped whispering in her ear. By the 2nd month, Elira stopped pretending. She knew the door hadn't closed completely. It had closed around her. Elanial hadn't lied, Elira was the gate now. The bond. The final lock on a vault filled with broken wings and bleeding prayers. And something was testing the hinges. One evening, she returned home to find a package waiting. No sender. No postage. Just a box made of stained wood and tied with a strand of what looked like human hair. Inside, a cracked mirror. And a note that read, "You are not alone, gatebound." The handwriting matched her own, but she never wrote it. That night, the dream changed. She stood at the altar again, but the mural was gone. In its place was a hole in the world, dark, pulsing, and lined with bone. And through it came a voice she didn't recognize. Elanial failed. You will, too. Then a claw emerged. Not a hand. Not a wing. A talon wrapped in scripture, ink dripping like blood. She woke with a scream, and found 3 scratches down her arm. Real. Bleeding. She returned to Avemore Hollow the next day. Merrin was waiting at the gate to the cathedral, as if she'd never left. You opened the door again, she said softly. I didn't mean to. You're the lock now. Every breath you take rattles it. Elira showed her the feather in the glass box. It's changing. Merrin nodded. It's molting. Something beneath it is waking. She reached into her cloak and handed Elira a key. I kept this from Corin's collection. He said it opened the mirror crypt. I thought I'd seen everything. No, Merrin's voice was barely a whisper. You've only seen her half. Now you'll see his. The mirror crypt lay beneath the old cemetery, through a tunnel sealed with prayers carved into stone. Elira descended alone. The key fit the lock. The chamber beyond was round and filled with water, still and black as ink. In the center floated a body, male, ageless, dressed in tattered robes that shimmered like night. He had no eyes, no mouth, just wings. Thousands of them, not sprouting from his back, from everywhere. His name burned behind her eyes. Avareth. He was Elaniel's twin, not her counterpart, her completion. Bound before language, forgotten because remembering him rips holes in reality. Father Corrin had sealed him here in reflection, afraid that knowing one side without the other would undo the world. Now, Elira had seen both, and the walls between them were cracking. She sat by the water for hours, watching the wings ripple, hearing nothing, yet knowing every beat of her heart echoed across a universe that was listening back. Finally, she stood. She dropped the glass box into the water. The feather floated. Then it dissolved, and Avareth opened his eyes. Not eyes like hers, not eyes like anyone's. Each eye was a mirror, and in each, Elira saw herself. As a child, as a woman, as Elaniel, as something else. Each version holding the door, each version breaking it. She screamed and the crypt filled with feathers. When she woke, she was back in her apartment. The mirror cracked in 4 places, and a new feather sat on her desk. White this time, but already rotting. She knew now, the cathedral was no longer in Ave More Hollow. It was in her, and every time she dreamed, it opened a little more. The white feather decayed in reverse. By morning, it had grown veins. By afternoon, it pulsed with a heartbeat. By night, it whispered Elira's name with a voice like distant thunder. Not aloud, never aloud, but directly into the marrow of her bones. She locked it in her bathroom cabinet, but its reflection remained in every mirror, even ones covered in cloth, even the backs of her eyes when she blinked. The 5th night after her return from the mirror crypt, Elira woke up to a name carved into her ceiling, Avareth. Each letter bled gently, not like a wound, but like a wound that missed bleeding. She stood beneath it, trembling, and whispered, "Why me?" From the crack in the floorboards came the answer, "Because you remember what no one else can." The children at the art center began to draw strange things. One drew a faceless woman with wings made of teeth. Another, a tower with eyes for windows and mouths for doors. One little girl, her name was Lana, handed Elira a picture of a black sun with 6 hands stretching from it. "It's the lady in your dreams," she said, matter of fact. Elira knelt down. "What lady?" "The one who teaches me songs in the dark." She began to hum, and Elira recognized it. The same hymn Elaniel had sung in the forest. She started keeping a notebook of these strange things. At first, it was a way to cope, but soon she realized she was collecting something. A language, a prayer, but not one meant for God. A prayer meant for the space before God, where wings and silence lived together, where names burned instead of blessed. On the 7th night, the feather split. Not like it was torn, more like it hatched. From within came a second feather, this one red as rust, soaked with something that smelled like both wine and old blood. It curled in her hand like a living thing. When she touched it to her skin, she saw a vision, the cathedral. Empty, but not silent. Something walked its halls, slow, dragging one leg, the sound of scraping stone trailing behind it. A shape that wore robes made of pages, each page covered in names. Her name was on the hem, written again and again and again. The vision ended with a scream that did not come from her throat, but from the walls around her. Elira dropped the feather. It vanished before it hit the floor. Merrin sent a message the next morning. 3 words scrawled in panic, "It's walking again." Elira returned to Avemore Hollow before nightfall. The village was empty. Windows shuttered. Doors barred. Candles burning behind every window. Merrin met her at the cathedral steps. Her eyes were wild. "We heard it speak last night." "Elaniel?" Elira asked. "No. Worse." Merrin shook her head. "We think it's the chronicler." Elira didn't understand at first. Merrin led her into the bell tower, where the old priest used to hide forbidden books. One book remained, chained to the stone. The binding was stitched with red thread that pulsed faintly. It opened itself as they approached, and on the first page was a phrase, "Every angel forgets their own name. That is how they fall." Merrin explained what little she knew. The chronicler was not angel or demon. It was the record, the memory of the divine world, cast out when heaven realized even memories could rebel. It had no body, just presence. It kept track of all unspoken things. When angels fell, it followed them. Not to save, to preserve. "It's been watching Elaniel since her first breath," Merrin said. "And now it's watching you." "Why now?" Elira whispered. "Because the seal is weakening. Your blood sings with her. Your dreams feed the gate." That night, Elira stayed in the cathedral. Alone. The mural had shifted again. It no longer showed Elaniel or Avreth. Now it showed her, Elira, standing between them, a crack in her chest where light and shadow leaked out in equal measure. At the bottom of the mural was a single line etched freshly: "The gate must choose." Midnight struck. Elira heard the bells again, though no rope moved. And then, the walls began to breathe. Not like air, like memory. They exhaled moments she had forgotten: her grandmother's death, her first broken heart, the day she fell off her bike and looked up to see a shadowed figure watching from the tree. All of it poured into the cathedral air, and from the shadows stepped the chronicler. Not a man, not a woman, not anything. A silhouette of torn parchment and glimmering ink, its face ever shifting, made of names. Elira's name drifted across its surface. Again, again, again. "You must forget her," it said. Its voice was many voices, hers, Merrin's, Corin's, Elaniel's. "You are the lock. You must not remember what she was. Only then will the seal hold." "But if I forget," Elira whispered, "you live. And if I remember, you become." The chronicler opened its chest. Inside was a single page, blank, waiting. "Choose." Elira looked down at her hand. The rust-colored feather had reappeared, burning slightly at the edges. She held it over the page, and let it fall. The cathedral shuddered. Outside, wind screamed like 1,000 voices being erased. Inside, the page caught fire, and the chronicler turned to ash. Not in pain, in relief. As the smoke cleared, Elira saw her reflection in the brass altar. She had no wings, but there were names etched down her arms now. Not scars, bindings. She was not just the lock anymore. She was the ledger, the page. And every time she whispered her name, a new one echoed behind it. Elaniel, Avreth, chronicler. All remembered now. All remembered through her. Elira no longer dreamed. Or rather, she no longer slept in the way mortals did. Each night, her body would lie still, but her mind drifted deeper than sleep, deeper than memory, into the space beneath names, where angels whispered to their own reflections, and prayers turned to rust before reaching anything holy. She wasn't dying. She was rewriting, and the world around her was beginning to notice. She spoke less in the waking hours. Not because she had nothing to say, but because every time she spoke, something changed. One day she told Merrin, "The sky is too quiet," and that evening the clouds trembled with thunder, despite a cloudless blue. She whispered once to a flower, "You look lonely," and when she returned the next day, the flower had grown thorns. Her voice had become scripture. She couldn't trust it anymore. Merrin brought her a bundle of old church scrolls, ancient ones hidden by Corin in the oldest catacombs. "We thought they were heretical," Merrin said, unrolling one with shaking fingers. "But now I think they were warnings." Elira read the symbols. Not with her eyes, but her skin. Each mark vibrated faintly against her fingertips. "They were written by one of the bound," she murmured. "No, not just written," Merrin said. "Some." "What?" Merrin unwrapped the final scroll. Black parchment. Ink that shimmered red under candlelight. "It's a psalm. The final one. Never meant to be read aloud." Elira didn't need to. She already knew it. It was in her bones. That night, the walls of the cathedral bled scripture. Every stone wept lines of the Black Psalm, words that writhed and tried to climb into her ears. She sat in the center of the sanctuary, wrapped in her own silence, her hands clasped over her ears, whispering her name over and over. "Elira, Elira, Elira," but each time she said it, it grew weaker. And another name grew stronger. Elamiel. Until finally, Avareth. At the stroke of midnight, the bell rang 13 times. The cathedral doors burst open. Not with wind, with absence. A thing entered, shaped like Elira, but taller, hollow-eyed, wrapped in wings made of scripture and silence. It walked the aisle, each step erasing the floor beneath it. Where it passed, history vanished. Paintings peeled away, candles flickered out, cracks split through every holy symbol. And when it stood before her, it bent its head and spoke. "You have begun the psalm." Elira couldn't speak, couldn't move. It continued. "You will end it, or the world will." The next morning, she found herself in the cemetery behind the cathedral. The entire village of Avemore Hollow stood in a circle, watching her. Merrin stepped forward. "You've started something. And we don't know if it's you anymore." Elira nodded. "I'm both," she said softly. Merrin handed her a cloth-covered bundle. "Corin left this. Said it was only to be given when the psalm began." Inside was a mirror. Not cracked, not cursed, pure. But its surface reflected nothing. No face, no light, just void. Elira stared into it for hours. Eventually, the void began to shift. She saw wings. Thousands. A storm of feathers. Not white, not black, but names. Each feather etched with a single name, spoken, forgotten, forbidden. She saw her own. Then thousands more. And then one she did not recognize. A name so old it burned her mouth to think it. Halrieth, the first angel. She began searching for it. Through Corin's journals. Through forbidden hymnals. Through every text she had once avoided as a child. Finally, she found a single line, half-burned in a prayer book, "Before light, before time." Halrieth opened the gate to dream. That night, Elira returned to the crypt beneath the cemetery. The water was gone. The mirror angel, Avareth, was gone too. Only the chain remained, wrapped in the shape of a circle, like a lock awaiting a key, or a crown. Elira placed the red feather at the center of the chain. The room rumbled. She felt a name press against the inside of her skull, demanding to be let in. Halrieth. She spoke it aloud. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time, her breath left her like a piece of her soul. And then, the gate opened. Not in the wall, not in the floor, in her. Her chest split, not with pain, but with clarity. A burst of light and shadow erupted from within, and her wings unfurled for the first time. Not angelic, not divine. They were made of pages. Each one a memory she never lived, a prayer she never heard, a sin she never committed but remembered anyway. She hovered above the floor, and the world bent toward her. Reality curved, and from the shadows came a voice older than stars. "You've called me." The figure that stepped through was neither man nor woman, neither angel nor God. It was Halriath, the beginning of the gate, the first whisper, the first wound in heaven. Elira knelt without knowing why. Halriath smiled without a mouth. "You remember. And so you are worthy." "Worthy for what?" Elira whispered. "To become the psalm." She stood, refused. "I am not your song. I am not your vessel." "You already are," Halriath said gently. "You finished the 5th verse when you spoke my name." Elira turned. The wall behind her bore 5 lines of glowing text. A poem half-written, a prophecy half-sung, and her voice trembled with the truth she couldn't deny. She had begun a psalm that only ended with silence. She fled the crypt. Merrin was waiting above. "What happened?" she asked. Elira looked up at the sky. It was full of eyes. Blinking stars that watched, that knew, that waited. "It's coming," Elira said. "What?" "The 7th bell." Merrin looked confused. "But it's only the 6th chapter." Elira smiled bitterly. "Exactly." The sound was not a chime. It was a fracture. Like the world itself had teeth and had just bitten into something holy. It rang out at dawn, when the sky was the color of split bone. One long note. Low. Endless. It did not echo, it lingered, weaving itself into the wind, into the breath of every creature still willing to breathe. Elira woke with blood in her mouth. Merrin was already at her side, eyes wide, hair damp with sweat. "You heard it." Elira didn't answer. She was the bell. From the moment Halriath spoke her name, Elira began undoing. Not dying, something deeper. The space between her ribs grew hollow. Not metaphorically. She could now pass her fingers through it in moonlight. Inside, she could feel memories not her own, a city of winged children building towers of glass. A man with his eyes sewn shut, weeping ink. The gates of heaven shattering like porcelain, not from war, but from doubt. Each vision brought her closer to the final verse of the Black Psalm, and once she finished the 10th, she would no longer be Elira. In the village, things had changed. No birds sang, no dogs barked, and the shadows no longer waited for the sun to move, they crawled on their own, licking at doorways, whispering to infants, curling like smoke under beds. Children began humming. The same tune. Elira heard it in her head every hour. She tried to plug her ears. But it wasn't coming from outside. It was leaking from her. Corin's last notebook had remained locked until now. Merrin handed it to her wordlessly. The moment Elira touched it, it opened on its own. There was only one entry, written in a language she now understood effortlessly. "If you find this, the 7th bell has rung. You are already becoming what we feared. But maybe, just maybe, the song can be diverted. Not stopped, but retuned. There is an 11th verse. No scroll had ever mentioned an 11th. Not even Halriath. But as Elira closed the book, she felt it humming beneath her fingernails. An unfinished melody. A broken chord waiting for its resolution. She went to the edge of the village, where the bones of the forest still stood. There, she built a circle. Not of salt, but of names. Carved in stone, whispered on leaves, stitched into her skin with ink from the rust-colored feather. Merrin helped. Neither of them spoke. They just listened. To the wind. To the hymn in Elira's pulse. To the seventh bell still ringing, days later, unheard by those not attuned to the gate. Elira sat in the circle, and for the first time, she began to sing. Not words. Names. The names of those who had vanished. Not by death, but by forgetting. She called them, a girl who had drawn black suns in the orphanage. A boy with silver tears who spoke backwards in his sleep. A woman who had wings once, but let them rot because no one believed her. They came, not in flesh, but in flame. Their memories lit the air, and one by one, they knelt. Not to Elira, to the 11th verse. In the sky, stars dimmed. One broke, and fell. It landed beside her in silence. A winged figure, but not Elaniel. Not Avareth. Not Halrieth. A child. Eyes too old. Voice too soft. You found the hidden line, the child said. What happens if I sing it? You divert the psalm. To where? To a place beyond endings. To peace. The child didn't answer. Instead, it opened its mouth and began to scream. But the scream made no sound. Only wind. Wind strong enough to peel bark, to snap trees in half, to tear open the veil between Elira and the gate itself. She saw it again. Not a door. Not a prison. A wound. Throbbing in the fabric of all that was holy. Bleeding memory into everything. The gate was not opened. It was never closed. The 11th verse began in her heart. Moved to her throat. Tasted like iron and starlight. She sang. Where angels forget, I remember. Where names burn, I write them in ash. Where heaven cracks, I offer silence. I am not the psalm. I am the pause between. Each line wrapped the gate in binding light. The air screamed. The earth shook. The wings of all the forgotten rose behind her. And for a moment, just a moment, the 7th bell stopped. Elira fell. Into herself. Into the hollow between who she was and who she had almost become. There, she met a version of herself with wings of pure black ink. It smiled. You made the gate blink. I didn't stop it, she said. No. But you gave it doubt. The version touched her chest. Where once there was a hollow, now was a mirror. Small. Fragile. But whole. Elira woke in Merrin's arms. The sky was grey. The wind was still. No songs hummed from the children. No shadows moved without permission. The 7th bell was silent. But only for now. Merrin helped her to her feet. Did you finish it? She asked. Elira shook her head. No. I rewrote it. That night, Elira dreamed again. Not of wings. Not of bells. But of a field of white feathers, each one blank. Waiting. And when she reached out to touch one, it wrote itself into being. Her name. Still hers. Still whole. But beneath it, in silver ink, another line, not the song. The silence between. The silence didn't last. Silence never does. It only sleeps, like a serpent coiled in a cradle, waiting to wake when someone dares speak truth again. Elira walked through Avemore Hollow with light footsteps and heavier thoughts. The sky had dulled to a color between bruised violet and old bone. The birds had returned, but only crows, and even they watched her with tilted heads, never cawing, just listening. Merrin kept close. She didn't say much anymore. Not out of fear, but reverence. Elira had sung something older than fear. Older than the gate. And now the gate listened back. The children had stopped humming, but they still drew. Images in dirt, in ash, on walls with bits of chalk and blood. Wings, always. But not attached to angels. Just hanging in the air, torn and weightless. Whose wings are those? Elira asked a girl named Sui. Sui tilted her head and said, "They belong to the ones who forgot their names." Then she pointed to the sky. "They're trying to find them again." Elira looked up, and the clouds moved in spirals, as though they were being read. In the days that followed, names began to fail. Not vanish, just slip. Mothers called children by the wrong name. Books lost their titles. Even Merrin, once so rooted, began pausing before saying Elira's name. "I know it," she said, fingers trembling, "but it's like it's underwater now. Blurred." Elira touched her own chest, where the hollow had once been. The mirror remained, small and round like a locket. Inside it, stillness. Not emptiness, just pause. She had not finished the psalm. She had made herself a verse of silence. And silence was never safe. Then came the dream again. The field of feathers. But this time, they weren't blank. They were bleeding. Each one dripped with ink, and where they landed, the ground blackened, cracking into stone. And standing at the far end of the field, Elaniel. Not broken. Not screaming. Calm. Waiting. Her wings were whole, but bound by gold wire, twisted tight across her back, pinning them down. Elira moved toward her, but the feathers formed a wall, rising higher, dripping thicker. Elaniel raised a hand. "You slowed the psalm," she said, "but it still moves." Elira woke with ink on her hands. No pen, no wounds, just ink, dripping from her palms, pooling at her feet. She traced the lines where it landed. Unfamiliar symbols. But when Merrin saw them, she gasped. "That's the 8th verse." "It's not in any of the scrolls," Elira whispered, "because it's not meant to be read. It's meant to be sacrificed." They returned to the crypt. The stone had changed. No longer silent, it breathed. Each slab rising and falling, as though the ground had lungs. Elira stepped inside, alone. This time, the walls sang. A melody not hers. Not the psalm. Something, reversed. Backwards. Unmaking. She walked deeper until she reached the circle of chains once again. But they weren't chains anymore. They were veins. Pulsing. Alive. And in the center, a feather. Not red. Not black. But clear like glass, or frozen light. She reached out and touched it, and the crypt shattered into stars. She found herself elsewhere. A cathedral, but upside down. Chandeliers hanging like roots. Pews arranged in spirals. And a choir of winged figures singing in complete silence. Elaniel stood before them. Her mouth moved with the rhythm, but no sound came. Then she turned to Elira. "You took the silence into yourself," she said, "and now you must give it back." "To whom?" "To the one who sang the first lie." Elira walked toward the altar. With each step, time bent. Her feet landed on memories, a child being blessed with ashen fire. A scribe crying as they burned their final verse. An angel burying their own name beneath a mountain so no one could summon them again. At the altar, a figure waited. Not Halriath, not Avareth, not Elaniel, but a woman with one wing. The other side was simply gone. Not torn, not damaged, erased. She looked up at Elira and spoke in the voice of every mother who's ever lost a child. "I am Jesha." Elira blinked. "You're not in the psalm." "I was the first voice cut from it." Jesha reached out and touched Elira's chest, where the mirror glowed faintly. "You held silence. You slowed the wound. But now you must name the thing that made the gate." Elira felt something stir in her throat. A name. Long cracked. Old enough to rot gods. "No," she whispered. "If I say it," Jesha nodded. Yes. You finish the 8th verse. And the gate fully wakes. Elira screamed into her hands. Not out of fear, but grief. Because she knew she would say it. She always would. It was written in her bones before she was ever born. Before she was sung into flesh. She spoke the name. And the world cracked. Back in the waking realm, the sky turned red. Not crimson. Vein red. Like the sky had become thin skin stretched too tightly. From horizon to horizon, feathers began to fall. Not snow-like. Each one hit the earth like iron. They embedded into wood, into stone, into flesh. The psalm was beginning again. Not the black psalm. Not the 11th verse. A new one. One Elira hadn't written. Someone else had taken up the hymn. She stumbled from the crypt into a world breaking in slow motion. People moved like shadows stretched across wax. The air shimmered with wrongness. And above it all, a voice began to sing. Pure. Smooth. Gentle. Not harsh. Worse. Kind. Elira fell to her knees. Merrin, she gasped. The song was hers. She found Merrin standing in the chapel ruins. Eyes glazed. Mouth open. Singing. Wings of glass sprouted from her back. Cracking. Growing. Fusing with the song pouring from her lips. She didn't see Elira. Didn't stop. The words fell from her mouth like droplets of silver. I sing what was forgotten. I bring what was sealed. I open where it hurts. I close what should not heal. Elira tried to shout. But her voice didn't work. She had given it to the 11th verse. She tried to run, but her legs felt like stone. So she crawled. Toward Merrin. Toward the rising gate behind her. The gate now wearing Merrin's body like a choir robe. And in her final effort, Elira reached out. And touched Merrin's heart. Where her name had once been. And with no voice, she remembered it. Merrin. The name struck like lightning. The song cracked. The wings froze mid-beat. And the gate screamed. Not Merrin. Not Halriath. Not the angels. The gate. Because for a moment, Elira had stolen its instrument. She fell backward, blood in her nose. Merrin collapsed beside her. The sky screamed. The feathers stopped. The red faded. And for just a moment, the psalm faltered. Elira knew it would return. The final verses still waited. But now, they would not be written by the gate. Or the forgotten. They would be hers. The world did not end. But it no longer began either. Time limped, its rhythm broken, like a choir that had forgotten the key and kept singing anyway. Days bled into each other like ink through parchment. Night arrived with no stars. Morning came dull and too quiet. Elira hadn't spoken in 3 days. Her voice was still gone, burned into Merrin's heart when she remembered her name. She communicated now through looks, gestures, and writing. But even ink seemed to resist her hand. Words twisted the moment she wrote them. Letters warped. Names unraveled. The psalm had stained her too deeply. Even the air could feel her. Merrin slept beside her every night. But her dreams were no longer her own. Elira watched as Merrin twitched, murmured strange syllables, and wept in her sleep. And each morning, new lines appeared beneath her skin, markings shaped like wings, like symbols older than alphabets. Merrin's body had become a canvas, and the gate kept writing on her. On the 4th night, Elira saw it again. Not in a dream, but outside. Above the woods. A single, massive feather floating mid-air like a ship, or a wound held aloft. It did not move. It did not fall. It simply watched. And beneath it, a shadow walked. Tall, faceless, barefoot, dragging behind it a trail of bones made not of ivory, but names. Elira watched it move silently along the tree line, each step erasing a bit of ground beneath its feet. Where it walked, nothing grew. Not rot, not mold, not dust, only forgetting. She turned to Merrin and wrote 3 words in the dirt: "It has come." Merrin only nodded. Her eyes were hollow, tired, but they didn't run. Because now, Elira knew there was no running from something that didn't walk toward you. The gate was not approaching, it was inside them, waiting, singing in reverse. They went to the chapel ruins again. The stone had cracked in long spirals, as if something beneath it was trying to breathe. There, they found the black-feathered angel once more, Avareth, or what was left of her. She was crouched on all 4s, wings bent backwards like broken branches, whispering the first verse of the psalm over and over. "I was not made. I was unspoken. I fell before falling was sin. I am the breath beneath God's pores." She didn't notice them at first, until Elira stepped closer. Then Avareth's eyes snapped up, milky, blind. But she saw. "You," she whispered, lips cracking. "You held the 11th silence." Elira nodded. She showed her palms, inked and stained, trembling. Avareth crawled forward, almost reverent. "You're the key to verse 9. The feather that forgot its flight." That was the name of the 9th verse. A feather. Not a wound. Not a death. A feather. The part of the angel no one noticed when it fell. The part that drifted alone, no longer attached to memory or meaning. A feather forgotten. And Elira had become it. Avareth reached forward and placed something in her hands. A single, white bone. But not of flesh. A bone made of song. It vibrated softly in Elira's hands. It felt warm, not alive, but mourning. Avareth whispered, "This was taken from the first angel." "Elaniel?" Merrin asked softly. Avareth shook her head, slowly. "No. Older." Merrin paled. There was an angel older than Elaniel. She was not sung. She was the pause before the song. The space that allowed it to be heard. Avareth raised her head to the sky. She loved too much. So they erased her. That night, Elira buried the bone beneath the feather in the sky. It floated above her still, unmoving. And as she placed the bone in the earth, it sank without touch. No soil clung to it. No insect stirred. It simply disappeared, like a memory not quite remembered. And in that moment, the feather above them trembled. Just once. Barely. But Elira saw it. And she knew the psalm had blinked again. The next morning, Merrin had wings. Not full. Not broken. Growing. Made of names. Names Elira had never heard, but could feel beneath her skin. Each feather sang its own note, but together they formed a melody of remembering. Not the gate's song. Not the psalm's hymn. But something before. A harmony of what the world might have been, had the first angel never been cut away. Merrin didn't notice the wings. Not yet. But Elira did. And she wept, for the first time in days. Because something pure was blooming inside the cursed. They went into the woods together. Not to run. Not to hide. To find the place where the psalm had first broken. The weeping tree. Corin's journals had mentioned it in riddles, where bark bleeds memory, he had written. Where roots drink forgetting. And when they reached it, they knew. The tree was vast. Dead. Towering. Carved with thousands of names, most unreadable, some crossed out. Its sap was black and flowed upwards. And beneath its branches stood a figure. Halriith. Whole. Radiant. And wrong. He turned, and the wind froze. His eyes glowed not with fire, but with stillness. No warmth. No light. Just pause. You have slowed the psalm, he said. "But you cannot end it." Elira shook her head. She pointed to Merrin, to her growing wings, to her stolen name, now reclaimed, and then to herself, to her hollow chest, now a mirror. Halriath stepped forward. "Mirrors can reflect lies." Elira stepped forward too. "And wounds can remember peace." She did not say it. She thought it. And the mirror in her chest sang once more. From the branches above, the clear feather fell. Not floating, falling, sharp as a dagger, bright as regret. It landed in Elira's hand. She did not bleed, because she had already bled all that was hers. She raised it toward Halriath, and in that moment, he paused. Not in anger, not in fear, in recognition. "You bear her mark," he whispered. "The first angel." And Elira, with her voice still gone, gave her answer. She stabbed the feather into the roots of the weeping tree. The ground screamed, not in sound, but in memory. The names carved into the bark burned gold. The sap stopped flowing. The black receded. And one by one, the roots of the tree began to lift, revealing beneath them a doorway. Not to the gate, but to the place the gate had tried to cover. The psalm had not begun at the gate. It had begun here, in the silence beneath the tree, in the heart of forgetting. And Elira now held the feather that could unwrite it. She turned to Merrin, to Halriath, to the forest. And for the first time, her voice returned. Broken, raspy, but real. And she spoke only one line. "I remember the one you erased." The sky cracked. The feather exploded into light. And the 9th verse was complete. The silence that followed the shattered feather's fall beneath the weeping tree was not the calm peace Elira expected. Instead, it felt like the moment before a storm breaks, thick and waiting, pregnant with impossible weight. Above them, the sky churned with a darkness neither night nor cloud, something ancient, restless, and hungry. The stars blinked out one by one, as if afraid to watch what would come next. Elira stood at the edge of the glowing doorway, its frame pulsing like the heartbeat of the world itself. Merrin's wings stretched behind her, broad and trembling, each feather alive with light and song, the names of those lost, reclaimed, and reborn. Halriath was silent beside them. His eyes, once dull pools of emptiness, now burned with something new, a flickering ember of remorse, of hope, or perhaps the bitter knowledge of what must be done. "Elira," Halriath's voice broke the heavy quiet, sounding as if he had spoken through ages of dust. "This path beyond the weeping tree is the end of the psalm. The final verse. What you will face is not merely a song, but the truth beneath the song, the silence before and after it." Elira's heart beat wildly, not from fear, but from something raw and sharp, like a blade cutting through old chains. "To end the psalm, I have to sing the last verse," she said quietly, voice rough from disuse. Halriath nodded gravely. "And that last verse is not a melody of angels or gods, but the collective breath of all existence, the forgotten, the fallen, the broken, and the hopeful." Merrin stepped closer, her wings folding softly but fully now, radiating a warm light. "I will sing with you," she promised, her voice steady like a vow. Together, they crossed into the glowing threshold beneath the ancient tree. The world warped and twisted, reshaping itself into a vast cathedral built from fractured memories and silenced voices. The walls whispered lost prayers, and the floor echoed the footsteps of those who had passed before them, their names inscribed on fading scrolls of light. At the cathedral's heart stood an empty throne hewn from crystal and shadow. It pulsed faintly with a dormant power, waiting for the rightful singer to claim it. Elira approached and knelt before the throne, the bone of the first angel glowing softly in her hands. The air thickened with presence, ghostly and palpable. The voices of fallen angels and forgotten souls rose as a low murmur, swelling into a choir of unspoken sorrow and fierce hope. The psalm began anew, not from a book or a songbird, but from Elira's very soul. The first lines were heavy with grief, a mourning for every broken wing, every severed connection, every forgotten name. The ache of millennia poured through her as she sang the longing for light, for belonging, for a place where silence did not mean erasure. But as the song deepened, the mournful notes wove themselves into something else, a tentative thread of healing, a fragile bloom amid ashes. Elira's voice trembled but grew stronger, carrying the truth that pain is never the end, that even broken wings can learn to carry the sky. Merrin joined, her voice a clear counterpoint of warmth and memory, weaving harmony that spoke of reclaiming what had been lost, of names remembered, songs restored, and the power to rewrite fate. Their voices intertwined, rising in a crescendo that shook the very foundations of the world. The gate, the monstrous wound that had birthed the psalm, quaked in response. The weeping tree's bark cracked and blossomed with golden leaves that shimmered like living stars. The hollow in Elira's chest filled with light, the void where silence had lived now filled with a brilliant, resounding truth. When the final note faded, a profound silence fell, this time different. It was the silence of a world that had finally remembered. Elira opened her eyes. The throne was gone, replaced by a warm glow that spread through the cathedral like dawn. Merrin smiled, her wings fully unfurled, casting rainbows upon the walls. Halriath bowed his head, the weight of his role lifted. "I am no longer needed," he whispered. And with a final shimmer, he dissolved into a cascade of light, scattered like whispers in the wind. Elira and Merrin stepped back through the portal, returning to the forest beneath the weeping tree. The sky was clear, stars blazing with ancient fire. The once dead tree bloomed fully, leaves glowing gold and silver, dripping with sap like liquid light. Feathers, white, black, and every shade between, fluttered down like soft snowflakes, settling gently upon the earth and the faces of those who watched from shadows. The psalm was finished. The angels, fallen or risen, had found their wings again. But Elira knew their journey was only beginning. For the song that saved the world would echo forever, in every broken heart, every silent whisper, and every soul brave enough to remember. And as she looked at Merrin, her friend, her songmate, her sister of wings, she knew that even in the deepest shadows, light would always find a way. The hollow wings had finally flown. Thank you for listening to this light story. If you enjoyed this lovely tale, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Light Story Club will be here for when you want to listen to another chronicle to help you rest. Goodbye for now.